Rahul Sharma, a respected businessman, and his devoted wife Meera seemed to have everything: a happy home, a young son, and a picture-perfect marriage. But when Meera's younger sister Anjali moved in, the bond that once held the family together unraveled into lies, betrayal, and a deadly secret that would end in murder. Rahul Sharma and Meera had what many considered the perfect love story. Their families had arranged the marriage, but over time, affection had blossomed into deep companionship. Rahul, in his early 30s, was ambitious and focused on growing his small trading company into a thriving business. His hard work paid off, and soon he was known as a dependable man with a sharp mind for success. Meera, gentle and devoted, found her happiness in managing their home and raising their young son. Neighbors admired the way she greeted everyone with warmth, and relatives often praised the harmony she created in her household. To the outside world, theirs was an enviable life, one built on trust, stability, and shared dreams. The couple's home in a bustling suburb of Mumbai reflected this outward perfection. It was modest yet comfortable, filled with laughter, the smell of freshly cooked meals, and the sound of their child's playful footsteps echoing through the hallways. On weekends, Rahul would take his family out for short trips, clicking photographs and capturing memories that would later line the walls of their living room. Friends often spoke of the bond the couple shared, pointing out how Rahul seemed to dote on Meera and how she, in turn, supported his every ambition. Their marriage appeared to be an ideal balance of love, loyalty, and respect. But perfection has a way of hiding the smallest cracks, the kind that are invisible at first glance. Rahul, beneath his polished exterior, carried desires and impulses that he kept carefully concealed. He enjoyed being admired, not only for his success but also for his charm. The attention he received from women outside his marriage fed his ego, though he never allowed it to escalate into anything serious, until the day Meera's younger sister, Anjali, entered their home. Anjali was a bright young woman in her early 20s, still pursuing her college degree. Circumstances had brought her to the city, and Meera welcomed her with open arms, offering her a place to stay until she completed her studies. For Meera, it was a joy to have her sister nearby, someone she trusted completely and cherished deeply. For Rahul, however, the presence of another young woman in the house created a dangerous shift he could not have anticipated. At first, it was innocent enough. Rahul treated Anjali with brotherly kindness, often asking about her studies, offering guidance, and sometimes dropping her off at classes when Meera was busy with their child. But as days turned into weeks, Rahul found himself noticing details he should not have: her youthful energy, her laughter, the way she carried herself with a confidence that contrasted sharply with Meera's quiet nature. These were fleeting thoughts at first, easily dismissed, but they began to linger. What Rahul saw as harmless admiration slowly evolved into something far more dangerous, a quiet obsession that he dared not admit, even to himself. Meera remained blissfully unaware of the subtle shift in her husband's attention. She trusted Rahul completely and saw nothing wrong in his occasional interactions with her sister. To her, it was natural that Rahul would be kind and protective toward Anjali, just as any brother-in-law should be. The three of them often spent evenings together, sharing meals, discussing the future, and laughing over small jokes. Yet behind Rahul's polite smile, his thoughts grew darker, setting in motion a chain of events that would eventually destroy the very life that once seemed so perfect. Anjali had always been carefree, full of the kind of youthful optimism that made her the center of attention in any room. She had ambitions of becoming a fashion designer, and her days were filled with classes, sketchbooks, and dreams of success. Rahul admired her drive, though at first he told himself it was in the same way a protective brother-in-law might admire a younger sibling's determination. But admiration has a way of bending into desire when boundaries begin to blur. The first signs were almost invisible. Rahul found reasons to linger in the living room while Anjali studied late into the night. He would ask about her assignments, pretending to be curious, when in truth he simply wanted an excuse to be near her. If she laughed at something he said, he carried that sound with him for the rest of the day, replaying it in his mind when he should have been focused on work. It wasn't long before Rahul began creating situations that allowed him to see her without Meera present. He volunteered to drive her to classes, insisted on helping her shop for supplies, and stayed close during family outings. What he disguised as kindness was, in reality, the slow unraveling of loyalty to his wife. Anjali, at first, thought nothing of Rahul's attention. She saw him as the steady older figure in the house, someone she could trust while living in a city that still felt overwhelming. She appreciated his advice and sometimes leaned on his confidence when her own wavered. But subtle changes soon made her uneasy. She noticed how his eyes lingered too long when she spoke, or how he found excuses to brush past her in the narrow kitchen. Though she ignored these signs, a small part of her recognized that Rahul's interest was no longer entirely innocent. What began as casual interactions eventually escalated into something unmistakable. Rahul became bolder, testing how far he could go without being caught. He slipped compliments into conversations, the kind that carried more weight than simple flattery. He praised her beauty, her smile, her spirit, words no brother-in-law should ever voice. Anjali felt torn. The attention was dangerous, but it also stirred something inside her, a mix of guilt and thrill that she struggled to suppress. She tried to convince herself it was harmless, just words with no meaning, but deep down she knew it was already too much. For Rahul, the danger only fueled his obsession. The secrecy was intoxicating. He began craving Anjali's presence, measuring his days by the moments he could steal with her. Even the smallest gestures, a glance across the dining table, a quick touch while passing a dish, fed his desire. He no longer felt satisfied with the life he had built with Meera. Instead, he grew restless, impatient, and consumed by thoughts of Anjali. The boundaries that once defined family began to dissolve. Rahul and Anjali found themselves pulled into a web of secrecy, each knowing they were crossing a line but unable to stop. What had begun as innocent attention had now transformed into a dangerous attraction, one that would soon spiral far beyond their control. The perfect household that Meera so carefully nurtured was slowly becoming a stage for betrayal, even though she had yet to see the truth that lurked just beneath the surface. Meera had always trusted her instincts, and though she tried to ignore the uneasiness building inside her, it only grew stronger with time. Rahul was not the same man she had married. His laughter seemed forced, his temper shorter, and his explanations about late night work calls no longer carried the same conviction. Meera noticed the distance between them widening in subtle but undeniable ways. He no longer reached for her hand in quiet moments, and his eyes seemed to avoid hers, as if he feared what she might discover by simply looking too closely. At first, Meera convinced herself she was imagining things. She blamed her insecurities, telling herself that Rahul was simply under pressure from work. But the whispers of doubt refused to quiet down. She began watching more carefully, noticing patterns she had previously overlooked. Rahul would often step outside to take phone calls and return looking agitated. He guarded his phone like a secret, keeping it close even while he slept. Small lies slipped into conversations, where he had been, whom he had met, why he was late. They were details that did not add up, leaving Meera unsettled. The breaking point came one evening when Rahul left his phone unattended on the couch. Their son had been playing nearby, and the device lit up with a notification. Meera, almost against her will, picked it up. What she saw sent a chill down her spine, a text message filled with words of intimacy and affection, words Rahul had once reserved for her, now directed at someone else. She read it again and again, her hands trembling as the truth crashed down on her. The message was not vague. It was clear, raw, and deeply personal. Rahul was having an affair. The betrayal cut even deeper when she recognized the name saved alongside the message, Anjali. Her own sister, the person she loved and trusted the most, was the other half of this secret. The realization was almost too much to process. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak, and confusion collided inside her, leaving her breathless. She confronted Anjali later that night, desperate for an explanation. Anjali, however, denied everything. Her eyes filled with guilt she tried to mask with excuses. Meera wanted to believe her, but the words on Rahul's phone could not be erased from her mind. Rahul, when confronted, twisted the situation with the smoothness of a practiced liar. He dismissed her accusations, claiming she had misunderstood. He painted the text as harmless, a joke taken out of context, and insisted she was letting her imagination run wild. He reminded her of all they had built together, using their history as a shield against her doubts. Meera wanted to trust him, but the seed of suspicion had already grown roots. From that moment forward, nothing in the house felt the same. Meera's once warm and safe home had turned cold and heavy, every glance between Rahul and Anjali loaded with unspoken meaning. She watched them carefully, noting small exchanges she had once overlooked, and each observation deepened her dread. The certainty of betrayal haunted her every waking moment, yet she kept her silence, waiting, watching, and fearing what the truth would ultimately reveal. Rahul was a man caught between two worlds, and each day the pressure of his double life grew heavier. To his family and community, he remained the hardworking husband and devoted father, but behind closed doors, he was consumed by his forbidden relationship with Anjali. What once felt like an exciting escape had now become a dangerous trap. Anjali was restless, fearing exposure, while Meera's suspicion loomed like a shadow that Rahul could no longer ignore. The walls were closing in, and he knew that eventually his carefully balanced life would collapse. The fear of losing everything drove Rahul into darker thoughts. If Meera uncovered the full truth, his reputation would be destroyed, his career ruined, and his family torn apart. The shame of being exposed haunted him more than the guilt of betrayal. His obsession with Anjali made him desperate to keep their secret alive at any cost. He began convincing himself that Meera was the obstacle standing in the way of his future, the barrier he needed to remove in order to live freely. In his twisted reasoning, eliminating her became not just an option but a solution. Rahul planned carefully, hiding his intentions beneath the mask of normalcy. He studied Meera's routines, her habits, and the times when she was most vulnerable. He rehearsed excuses in his mind, building a story he could tell if anyone began asking questions. To the outside world, he wanted the appearance of a loving husband trying to mend a strained marriage, but in truth, he was plotting her end. The night he chose to act was heavy with rain, the sky splitting open with flashes of lightning. He suggested a drive to Meera, framing it as a chance to talk and clear the air between them. Meera, weary from weeks of tension, agreed. She hoped that perhaps they could rebuild what had been broken, that maybe Rahul's distance had been nothing more than stress. Clinging to hope, she stepped into the car beside him, unaware of the fate that awaited her. The road stretched dark and lonely, the storm masking the sound of tires against wet asphalt. Rahul drove in silence, his grip tight on the wheel, his mind racing with the weight of what he was about to do. Meera looked out of the window, lost in her own thoughts, never suspecting that the man she trusted with her life was preparing to take it. At a secluded stretch of road near the outskirts of the city, Rahul pulled over, pretending the car had developed a problem. As Meera stepped out to help, confusion flashed across her face when she turned back to see him closing in with cold intent. In that moment, Rahul's plan unfolded with brutal finality. Hours later, her lifeless body was discovered near a ravine, battered and broken by the fall. Rahul presented himself as a grieving husband, claiming it was a tragic accident caused by the storm and slippery road. His performance was convincing to those who saw only the surface, but the truth lingered in the details. The injuries on Meera's body did not match his story, and investigators began to suspect that what appeared to be an accident was, in fact, something far more sinister. The news of Meera's sudden death spread quickly, sending shockwaves through both families. Relatives rushed to console Rahul, who played his role as the grieving husband with chilling precision. He wept publicly, spoke of fate and misfortune, and described how helpless he felt as the storm claimed his wife's life. Neighbors pitied him, friends offered support, and at first, his story seemed tragically believable. But beneath the surface, investigators were already piecing together details that did not align with his account. The post-mortem revealed injuries inconsistent with a fall caused by an accident. Marks on Meera's body suggested a struggle, her wounds hinting at deliberate violence rather than misfortune. Detectives began quietly examining Rahul's background, his financial dealings, and his personal life. It did not take long for whispers of an inappropriate relationship with Anjali to surface. Rumors spread from neighbors who had noticed unusual closeness to classmates of Anjali who had overheard late-night phone calls. The puzzle pieces began to form a disturbing picture. Police obtained Rahul's phone records, uncovering a string of messages that painted a story of obsession and betrayal. The messages between Rahul and Anjali were explicit, filled with declarations of longing and plans that excluded Meera entirely. Investigators realized the motive was not only lust, but also the desire for freedom without scandal. Meera had become the obstacle that Rahul felt he needed to erase, and the evidence supported that theory. Anjali, under immense pressure, could no longer carry the weight of the secret. Questioned by authorities, she broke down and confessed to the affair. She admitted that she had been involved with Rahul, but insisted she had no part in Meera's death. Her testimony, however, was enough to seal Rahul's fate. With her cooperation, the investigators gained insight into Rahul's behavior, his threats, and his desperate attempts to keep their relationship hidden. The facade of the perfect husband shattered completely, exposing a man willing to sacrifice everything, including his wife's life, to protect his forbidden desires. Rahul was arrested, and the trial that followed gripped the community. In court, prosecutors painted him as a cold and calculating man who plotted his wife's murder to continue his affair. His defense tried to cling to the narrative of a tragic accident, but the weight of the evidence, from forensic reports to digital records and Anjali's testimony, dismantled his lies. Witness after witness confirmed the changes in his behavior, the secrecy, and the tension that had consumed the household in the months leading up to Meera's death. The jury's verdict was unanimous. Rahul was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. His downfall was complete. The man once admired for his charm and success was now remembered as a husband who betrayed and destroyed his own family. Anjali withdrew from public life, burdened with shame and guilt, her name forever tied to her sister's tragic end. Meera's death became more than just a personal tragedy. It served as a haunting reminder of how love can be twisted into obsession and how betrayal can spiral into violence. What began as a marriage admired by all ended in devastation, leaving behind scars that no passage of time could ever heal.